Hey guys, happy Tuesday. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm glad that you were able to take some time out to attend this live event. I would like to welcome all of our new attendees from around the world and welcome back all of our previous listeners as well. Time to grab your lunch, coffee, or popcorn, and let's get this going. My name is Anuj Sehgal, and I'm the VP of Sales for Strategic Accounts at BayOne Solutions. A lot of you already know me, and for those who don't, a quick introduction about me. I'm a goofy, fun guy that loves to talk about technology, sports, stocks, spades, crypto, and that means entertainment is guaranteed. Dogecoin to the moon! That was a joke. So jokes aside, a big thank you to BayOne for hosting this special event. BayOne helps large companies compete like a startup. Since inception, BayOne has been helping companies with their transformation journey. Whether moving to the future of work by providing qualified experts on demand, training their legacy workforce on future technologies, or automating their business processes, BayOne has been doing it all. BayOne has been focusing a lot on our community and giving back ever since the pandemic has started. We have been hosting these insightful webinars for over a year now, and happy to welcome you back. So this is a pretty interesting year in that sense. There's just so much happening. So what we're really doing is we're hosting a series of future of work events because the technology landscape is changing fairly quickly, and the job responsibilities and organizations are changing even faster. The first of these events being future of product management. I also wanted to give a big shout out to our valuable customers, employees, and consultants that are making a difference. And also a hello to all of our future customers listening in. So why do this? What's really happening? Why product management? We've received a ton of feedback and questions on product management. Keeping that in mind, we wanted to invite an elite panel to talk about how to get into product and the evolution of product management itself, and how you can get involved with the same and maybe answer some of your questions along the way. So without further delay, let me introduce you to my close friends and the panel for today, starting with the ladies. Nidhi Wadmark. She's a principal product manager at PayPal. She has extensive experience in payments, healthcare, financial services, e-commerce, capital markets, and management consulting. She also leads a chapter for women in product, serving as a mentor to aspiring and early product managers. Megha Rastogi is a Cornell, Harvard, and an MIT graduate. She has more than a decade of experience building innovative products at leading global companies like Expedia, Yahoo, and Verizon. Currently, she is a lead product manager at SurveyMonkey, managing machine learning-powered insights and unifying identity and access management across SurveyMonkey products. Travis Killion was recently a VP of e-commerce and loyalty at Vitamin World. With over 25 years working with internet technologies, Travis has held roles in business management, product management, and technology management. From startups to large companies, he's created digital products and services across many types of domain, including real estate, retail, e-commerce, and loyalty. And last but not the least, Ashish Jain, who is a product visionary and strategist in mobility, identity, and security product development. He is currently the Chief Product Officer at Arkose Labs, where he is responsible for managing global product and engineering teams. Previously, he was the head of identity at eBay as well. I hope you're all as excited as I am to get this going. So with that, let me hand this off to Ashish for a keynote, and let's get the party started.
Anuj, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to BayOne for giving the opportunity to share some of my thoughts, and happy to be part of this panel. And before we get into the panel discussion, I wanted to take a few minutes just to kind of share my thoughts into how product management has evolved. What are some of the key kind of skill set that I see in the need today, and hopefully that should lead into a good engaging discussion in the second part of this session. So if you share the slide on the first one, and I wanted to kind of start a little bit on the on the lighter note, right? Product management is an art, and it depends so much on the context. And the context can be, what vertical or what industry you are part of, what stage of the company, who are your competitors, and what stage of your career that you are currently tracking towards. But it's about finding the right balance, and the right balance in between the richness of features and simplicity, the right balance between the security and the end user experience, the right balance in between time to market and the quality of the product. And then because it is so much dependent on the context, this is why you will not find too many courses or classroom setting, because you would need to learn some of that as part of your kind of day-to-day job. And that makes it sometimes complex to become an expert, but it also makes it a lot more exciting and fun to be part of this trade. So if you come to the next slide, and I'm sure you have seen some version of this in your past, that product management is kind of the connective tissue across different parts of the organization, right? So it's customer, technology, and business. And you can think of the business a combination of sales and marketing and leadership and partners and analysts. And on a good day, you can say a product manager is like the CEO of the product. On a not so good day, you can make the argument that you're more of a janitor, or at least you feel like one who has to clean up and all the different pieces and become a catch-all person. But I think the intent here to share is that product management is a function which is the glue which keeps the product design, development, and the go-to-market. And hence it is critical for us to figure out what are some of the kind of key skill set that you need as you go forward. Now, many times the skill set that you need are dependent on if you are in a specialized domain, whether you are an IC or a leadership, whether or not you work into a red ocean versus a blue ocean type of market. And I wanted to share some perspective of some skill set that I believe are relevant regardless of any of the things I just mentioned. And what I share with you, they are not meant to, how do you crack an interview at Google or an Amazon, right? There is a plenty of resources available on the net if this is what you're looking for. The intent here is to share, as a product manager, what are the areas that you should be conscious about and continue to improve as you get more and deeper and much higher in your career progression. So the first one I list is kind of curiosity. And we all live in a very changing, evolving, and a dynamic world, right? If you think about it, the iOS wasn't, or iPhone wasn't there 15 years ago. And if you look into where we are today, right, there is more than 2 million applications in the iOS app store alone. Like, I think Android is 3 million or so. And I'm sure you have all heard of BlackBerry, but I'll be surprised if any one of you use that today. Many of us kind of grew up with cassettes and CD players, and it is impossible to find any CD player today, right? And if Tesla was started, I want to say about 10 years ago, when was the first time the first Tesla was sold. And if you look where the companies today, their market cap is bigger than the combined market cap of the next 9 auto manufacturers, including GM and Ford and Toyota and Hyundai and BMW and so forth. So this kind of tells you that the industry, the tech industry that we work in, is in a way, it's kind of ruthless and disruptive in so many ways. And hence, as a product person, you need to be able to acknowledge it. You need to embrace the change, and you need to be always in a constant mode of learning. And otherwise, it is going to be hard for you to keep pace with this evolving dynamic marketplace and being effective in your job. This is why I list kind of curiosity / kind of learning as the number one skill set that you should be careful for. The second one I want to talk about is customer empathy. And I think the reason why it is critical, like, we all have certain biases, whether we like it or not, and we have a specific point of view. And I think I've heard the statement a few times that you should have strong opinions, but you should hold them very lightly. And it is very critical for you to make a forced effort to put yourself into the customer's shoes and try to see the product from their angle. Like listening is harder than you initially think. And the ability and the skill set to continue to solicit feedback over a period of time and make it as part of your habit and become a champion of your product, of what your customers hate, what your customers love, is very, very critical. So in many ways, is like I said, you can take learning as a higher meta point, and both the curiosity of understanding the industry and the domain, and in understanding your customer use cases, I would put that into that bucket. The third one I want to highlight is communication, and I cannot stress the need for communication enough. Many of the PMs that I get to work with, they come, for instance, from an engineering background, and engineers are normally not known for their communication skills, and they're of course, I don't mean to generalize this, but in generally they're not always very extrovert people, and it takes time to become into a habit when you want to be able to talk and explain about what you have done. And especially like if you are an immigrant, let's just say, and the language of the workplace is different than your native language, it also becomes a little bit even more challenging. And when I talk about communication, it is both kind of verbal and written communication. And from what I have seen, if there is like one skill that I see which prevents the smart people from advancing in a career after a certain point, or which can act as a ceiling effect, I would put communication as that skill set. And there are plenty of ways to address it. There is no lack of online resources when you can get better in terms of your writing style. There are a few habits that you can pick up that I've heard have worked out fairly good. The habit of always taking notes, the habit of start to write on a daily basis, even if you write 1 to 2 lines, and even if you write just to yourself, but the habit of trying to communicate your thoughts and your product and your knowledge through both verbal and written communication is a very, very key things to do. The next thing is analytics, and I probably would not have put that skill maybe 10 years ago, but with the amount of data that we all have available, you will be missing out if you're not using this appropriately. And we all have some preconceived notions, we all have some blind spots, and hence the concept of a data-driven decisioning is something that you need to continue to get better. Now, I can make the argument that this is one skill which is a lot more relevant when you are working in a B2C type environment and dealing with a large customer population compared to, let's just say, if you're working in the enterprise infrastructure. Having said that, some basic knowledge of stats, being able to calculate, visualize, interpret different types of data, it's something that you would need to continue to pay attention. And the last one, I would put that as a synthesis, right? A PM job is, like we mentioned earlier, whether you are the CEO of the product or the janitor, but take the requirements from everyone who will touch or interface with the product, whether it's a customer or a partner or a developer or your sales team, your marketing teams. You connect the dots, so you synthesize it, and then you build a perspective. So that some people refer to that as a product sense, some people refer to that as kind of market sense, but the ability to bring things together for your domain, for your product, I kind of overall put that into the bucket of synthesis. And if I kind of summarize it, right, the ability to understand your domain, your industry, learn from your customers, continue to learn from your customers, analyze the data, synthesize all of that, categorize all of that, and communicate. I feel like that's what I would define the role of a PM or the role of a PM function. And I believe for majority of what I describe is relevant regardless of what industry or what vertical or what stage of company that you're part of. What I also wanted to do is kind of take a quick moment to share some of my recommendations of how do you go about it. So there is no lack of books, as you can imagine, in terms of just self-help, motivation, business. But I handpicked these books because in my mind, they cover a spectrum of things that you should think about when you are building a product, right? So Inspired and Hooked, in the first two books you should pick up in terms of, regardless of your career stage, just to be able to figure out how to build the products, how to make habits, how to understand that concept, and how to create that engagement and attachment with your customers. The Measure What Matters, it talks about what are the metrics that you should be measuring, because sometimes if you're measuring the wrong metrics, you're going to end up driving the wrong decision. So it's kind of important to understand that Dare to Lead is that as you grow in your career and you have to lead a team, you have to drive a change, you have to negotiate whether it is, for what feature to prioritize or with your customers. So it's kind of important to have that mindset. The 0 to 1 is more like when you're starting, and then how to get into that innovative mindset. So it gives a very good examples. Like, you're not gonna, you can learn from Zuckerberg about how we built Facebook, but most likely you are not building Facebook again. So you need to know what lessons to pick up as you follow other people. And then the idea behind building a story, I'm sure you've heard, like, Steve Jobs, like, how every product person should be a storyteller. So it kind of gives you an idea how to engage with the customers and build a story, both for your product, your brand, and for yourself. So like I said, this kind of, in my mind, covers a spectrum of skill sets that I mentioned earlier. And all these books, there are a few other great authors. I'm a big fan of Adam Grant. I'm a big fan of Tom Rath. I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink. There are a few other great authors that you can follow, but I would strongly recommend to at least pick up these as you go along. In addition to these books, I also wanted to share a few more links that I have used extensively in the past and shared with my teams. Depending upon your kind of learning style, there are a few podcasts that I hugely appreciate. I know I used to listen to them while driving to work, so I haven't done that as comprehensively lately. But whether you're on a treadmill or taking a walk, many of them bring other product people into their podcast as a guest, and you're gonna get to see the journey behind the scene. You learn about grit, you learn about luck, you learn about insights, and I think it is great. The one that I have picked here, I strongly get a lot of insights by listening to them. And then you also, if you're looking for like some fundamental basic skill set and some processes that you would need to be able to understand, some of the items listed here, and I'm hoping we get to share the slides with you after the discussion. It will give you an idea about how to kind of get started and continue to stay up to date. So this is kind of my thought process. Again, very happy and excited to be here and looking forward to the second half of this session as part of the panel. Anuj, back to you. Oh, okay. No test or no session should be complete without a quiz. So this is a quiz to all of you. What is a product manager's favorite wine? And I don't know if you can answer that through chat, but I hope some of you would get a chuckle out of it. It is the low-hanging fruit, and I'm sure we all talk about that every single day at work. So on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Anuj.
Thank you so much, Ashish, and that was awesome. Actually, I definitely feel like opening up a bottle of wine right now. But thank you so much for sharing all of those resources. I think they're super helpful. This was super interesting. Let's move on to the panel then. Hey Travis, hey Mega, hey Nidhi.
Hello.
What a great way to set the stage, Ashish. Thanks very much. Let's keep the momentum going by jumping into more, some more depth on the important topics you highlighted and a few others. First topic I think would be great to discuss is the notion of getting into product management. Everyone has a different story and a journey. For example, I ran my own design firm for a while, and then I jumped into technology for about 10 years. Given my talent for figuring it out, I transitioned to product management because I knew we needed better products and features for customers, and I'd already been helping define those requirements and use cases at the time. And the rest is history. But from another perspective, Nidhi, why don't you tell us, and the listeners more about your journey into product management?
Sure. Thanks, Travis. My educational background is economics, accounting, finance. I do not come from an engineering background. And my first paying job in the US was actually as a flight attendant for American Airlines, which again is very unconventional. At the time, I also worked at a startup Monday to Friday and then flew for the airline over the weekend. And then soon after that, I moved to the Federal Reserve Bank, then on to management consulting. At one point, I wanted to get into capital markets, and that led me to take a role at the Federal Home Loan Bank, followed by roles in healthcare, e-commerce, and now very recently in payments at PayPal. And I say the reason I give that trajectory is because I think there is this myth that you have to come from an engineering background and there's only a linear path. I think my story is the complete opposite. I really do think it's rock climbing. What I have found is, I've always found myself drawn to opportunities that focused on the process of understanding the customer needs, irrespective of which domain that was, finding a way to fulfill and anticipate not just current, but also future needs, developing relationships and leveraging technology to solve problems and rally teams around a vision to build products and services that have an impact on people's lives at scales. And I think that has sort of been how I got into, I think the product management specific titles came later, but the work that I've done, irrespective of be it at the Federal Reserve or capital markets or even in payments, they fall in that eco space of what we now truly, I think in the last several years, have product management as a discipline growing across all different domains.
Thank you, Nidhi. Megha, can you tell us your story?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Travis. Mine is a little bit more of a traditional story. I am from an engineering background. So I completed my engineering, moved into the telecom industry, and I was, as an engineer building features or parts of the features. And slowly I started to question, like, how does this feature fit into the larger product vision? How does it add value to customers? And I wanted to see things holistically and work with our customers directly and solve pain points. So that's how I moved into product management slowly. And now I've been there for a decade, moved from telecom to product strategy with Yahoo in emerging markets. Then I moved into the travel industry with the global product management role at Expedia. And now I'm at SurveyMonkey, leading the machine learning platform side. So yeah, as Nidhi said, it's all about keeping the customer at the focus. And no matter what path we take, we all end up solving customer problems. So happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, Megha. Ashish, I'm fascinated to hear the path that you took. Same, different?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it is interesting observation that how at least the three of you shared very different route to coming to where we are today. And I think at the end of the day, if you think about it, if you have the general aptitude and the customer listening and how you put things together is what you need. And I get to see people from engineering, customer success, support, and Nidhi, yours was definitely a new one to learn. Mine was also very traditional. I started with engineering. I spent the first 10 years being in that role. And if you think about it, like after a while, you decide whether you want to continue in that path, become an architect, or become more customer face. So I shifted almost by accident because I was at a startup, and you end up essentially doing everything at a startup. Doesn't matter what background you come from. And I fell in love with working more closely with the customer. So I spent the last 15 years in that function and enjoying it so far.
Well, thank you very much. As you can tell from the speaker's stories to our audience, right? They've evolved throughout their careers. And in a similar way, product management has also evolved and continues to change. While the earliest roots of modern product management started in 1931 at Procter & Gamble, it got a major boost from Hewlett-Packard in 1943 being a core role of the company. And then with the Agile Manifesto in 2000 with Scrum and everything else that started and eventually Lean, right, it really got another bump. And it's worth calling out though, and this is something that Ashish touched on, that the product manager's role can vary. Some act like the mini CEO of their product for P&L all the way down. Some have less liberty, but still have heavy responsibility to help frame the business strategy and then help to define the products and lead it through the build process. Yet others, more of the janitor conversation, right? Somebody else figures out the business by working with those team members. Product managers then focus on defining the actual product and then getting it into development. But regardless of the company, the essence of the role is to create a bridge, right? When you saw the diagram presented by Ashish, between business, the customer, and technology. So the role of product managers must change with the times. For example, COVID has changed the mix of work. Besides the new fashion of dress shirts and sweats, no, I'm not wearing them right now, or maybe I am, or the beloved, face mask, which has been added to, or kind of like in addition to the tie, maybe, or replacing it, remote work has had a quantum leap. And so, Ashish, I'd like you to tell our listeners how you view the mix between remote work, on-site, and hybrid work.
Fair enough. So I think the concept of a distributed and global team is not new, right? And especially if you are in the valley, if you go to a certain stage, most likely you end up having offices across the country or in different continents. Having said that, I feel like COVID just took that to a completely different level. Like the in-person customer meetings and the ad hoc whiteboarding sessions with your architect or the engineering counterparts completely disappeared. And it is still TBD in my mind of how things will eventually work out when COVID is over. But I'll be surprised if we go back to the exact same state where we were about a year ago. And I feel like this remote distributed over a Zoom kind of a discussion will continue to happen. And in my mind, we have adapted to some of that. I still think there is some richness that you can get by in-person whiteboarding discussions. But given that this is the world we're going to live in, I believe the communication becomes even a bigger skill set that you need to acquire. And at the same time, personally, I do not think meeting somebody in person can be replaced, especially for more futuristic. But at least the operational side, I feel like as an industry, we have adopted fairly well by working remotely with each other.
Great, thank you. Think about it, Megha, right? Another aspect of the evolution of product managers is specialized roles such as machine learning, growth, and platforms. Can you share a little more about this?
Yeah, so like you had said earlier, traditionally product management came from the marketing side, and it was a general product manager role where you were trying to solve customer problems. But now as companies are growing and also as we're moving into remote world, there are different aspects to product management and a different growth stages the companies at. So there have been an evolution of some specialized roles, like having platform product managers that are focused on scaling the platform and how you can meet the customer needs by scale. And on the flip side, there's also a role for growth PMs who are focused on more tactical on how to grow the product and acquire more users, perhaps. And then another role is machine learning product manager, which is relatively new and which is where I am today. And that's, you're trying to solve customer problems, but there's a new variable put in the picture, which is data. So how do you get the right data that builds the algorithms and gives the accurate predictions you're looking for? And then beyond that, you also have to take in factors like ethical AI and what that data can do to the end user. So definitely an evolution of where we were and where we are going, depending on the stage of the company.
Yeah, that's a great tidbit you said there, because it's interesting, because product management used to be very much akin to a rules-based logic that says, do these things and only these things. So you go from defining the product, and now it's a little different because sometimes it's training the product, right? So how you think about what you're doing is different. But I want to double click a little bit on a nuance here. Like, can you share a bit more of, since you're talking about the different specialization of product managers, who's leading? Is someone leading growth or sales? Is it marketing? Like, is it product? Like, what's your point of view on this one?
Yeah, so in the past, there used to be you build a product, you give it to sales, they sell it, or you give it to marketing, they put a marketing spin around it. But now more and more the focus that we see is moving towards product-led growth, which means that the product itself is able to acquire users, retain users, and is the selling point itself. So a lot of the focus is on building that intelligent product, and that's why a lot of the machine learning has been coming in. But also in other ways, how do you put those hooks in the product that gets the user to keep coming back and using the product? So that is the focus on product-led growth today.
Thank you, Megha. I like that. If you guys have ever been to some of the trade shows or the national marketing shows, you'll see there are a lot more like tech shows than they ever used to be. Again, showing some of the way things are changing. Nidhi, I made a statement that the essence of product management is to create the bridge between business, customers, and technology. And I assert this critical need is part of why product management and the role continues to see growth. Can you share your own view on why you think the role is growing?
Yeah. Ever since I've put PayPal on my LinkedIn profile, I have had so many requests from students, aspiring product managers, and it seems like everyone wants to get into product management, right? So I really think in recent years, the product management roles have steadily risen both in demand and I think popularity. And I think there are various, there's several reasons for this. Now, if you go back a little bit, you look at the first industrial revolution started in 1760. The major invention was the steam engine. It took it was like almost 1 century later that we then had the second revolution, and that was characterized by mass production in steel and oil and electricity. And then the third revolution, or rather the digital revolution, came about in 1960. And we are now living in the fourth industrial revolution. And I think it's very different from the third for two very reasons, right? The gap between digital, physical, and biological worlds is shrinking, and technology is changing faster than ever. And I think the fourth industrial revolution emerges from, sort of what Megha alluded to, like AI and Internet of Things. So I really think the pace of technology has accelerated dramatically and will continue to do so. We live in an increasing digital and interconnected world. Our habits and our expectations have changed in pace. And I think in many industries, competition often is quite literally one click away. So if you snooze on the quality of your product experience, you lose. So to keep up with this growing and ever-changing market and customer needs, it is imperative for companies to deliver excellent digital experience that aligns with their products and services. Now, this sounds very easy, but I think in practice, truly being customer-centric, being customer-obsessed, creating seamless online, offline customer experience is exceedingly difficult. So product management is a very fluid and, it's a connective role, and it is highly demanding. And I think everyone sort of alluded that it varies considerably by situation and from company to company. But the need for people with insatiable curiosity, strategic thinking, good communication, effective collaboration, technical acumen, user science and empathy, the ability to focus on details and quality and leadership traits, I think that is universal, and that's a business imperative. And hence, I think this growing need for a product management and people that truly have the right skills, because great product managers don't just ship features. I think the really phenomenal and great product managers, they do whatever it takes to deliver value to the customers, to deliver valuable outcomes for the customer, their team, and the company. And I think this drive, it doesn't matter. I mean, when I look at whether I've worked in capital markets or healthcare or e-commerce, or even now in payments, I mean, every employee in a company, I love what Fred Kaufman says, right? You have one role, and your one role is to enable your company to win. Your functional title doesn't quite matter. And I think product management requires this very unique skills because of the nature of its work. And I think the need for this role continues to grow, and I think will continue to do so because we're just living in a very, very evolving and different world.
Thank you, Nidhi. That's really good food for thought. I'd also want to add a little piece to that. in the age of now where all this information and tools are available to our customers, right? It is the age of the customer in many ways. So their expectations and their demands keep continuing to grow, forcing this change and this growth, meaning that companies have to also keep investing into it. Because again, if the competition is one click away and the barrier to entry is lower now from a technology perspective, you have to keep pressing and delighting customers, or eventually they're going to go somewhere else. Now, Ashish, you had mentioned earlier on about the skills you talked about, like leading with curiosity. And as we see this, can you speak to how you think, are those skills evolving, or do you think they're kind of stationary? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I think, and Nithi kind of covered on that a little bit, but as we mature as an industry, if you think about it, even society and any ecosystem, as you continue to mature, you definitely have a need for the table stakes skills, but you also get more and more specialized, right? Even, life first happens on Earth. The first microorganism, the first cell had all the functions, and then fast forward to today, you have a separate kidney, separate liver, and a separate heart, because then you have specialized functions. And I think Megha was alluding towards, right, which is, 5 years ago, actually 10 years ago, PM is a function which is probably done by the combination of engineering and leadership and marketing and so forth. And then we came to product management should be a dedicated, decoupled function from the rest of the roles in the company. And then where we see today that you will see a growth PM, which will have a different set of skill set. You will see a machine learning PM. You will see a platform and an architecture PM. And it is interesting to see that how this is becoming more and more refined and more specialized. Now, having said that, the basic skill set we talk about, whether they're around communication or curiosity or customer obsession, they will remain regardless of what specialized function that you go. But I see more and more unique subset of the product management function. And then you take all of them and then you apply verticals, right? For instance, a PM who is working on enterprise infrastructure security versus a PM who is developing the mobile app for DoorDash, right? Over a period of time, the skill set and the places that excites you would be different, and it becomes a little bit different to change one versus from one to the other. In the early part, I think it is critical for you to understand what you enjoy, what you like, what is your knack, what are your strengths, because early part of your career, it makes so much more sense. And going forward, I'm not saying it is not possible, but it makes it a little bit difficult because you start to get attached to a certain set of domains and skill sets.
Great, thank you, Ashish. As I think about the skills and roles changing, it takes me back to the question about the growth of the role. Nithi, can you give a little more insight on how you think a person will change in their role from, say, an individual contributor to a manager or into a leader? So we've talked about the dimensions of product management on skill sets and across the interaction with other team members, right? And further defining a discipline. But what do you think about going from an IC level into somebody that's progressing into management, or more even up that ladder further into leadership?
Yeah, I think as product managers get more senior, you shift from managing products to leading more of strategy and people. And I forget who said this, so I don't want to give the wrong name, but I think I remember attending a conversation or perhaps reading something where it was a VP of product, and he said the people who run a shipyard, they don't actually build the ships themselves. They hire the best shipbuilders. They create a proper environment for building ships, and they provide their people the support and the tools they need to do great work. And I think that is really the shift that happens when you move from an individual contributor to managing people and on a growth trajectory. Because I think as a leader, you are building a shipyard, and the ships or the product your team builds can only be as good as the shipyard that produces them. So coaching, mentoring, providing clarity, I think is critical. Managing up and across business outcome ownership, taking lead on product vision becomes, I think, more of a focus when you move away from an IC to a leadership focus. And I think it's also about, you have to hone that muscle and sometimes get the right trainings, that you learn to delegate more, because it's not easy to make that shift, because it's so, how it's to be done. And I think you really sometimes have to take a step back and figure out, how do I enable others to do that and give them the right, or create the right environment and the tools and resources so that you can now focus on truly becoming, a leader. Because great people managers, your role becomes more and more around rallying teams, stakeholders, and senior leaders around a common vision, right? You're responsible for creating that necessary energy that truly turns a product aspiration into valuable products and delivers business results. I do think it's not just about, it's product management that has, I think, on the facade is that, oh, it's so cool and you're always shipping things. There's so much grunt work that goes behind it that I think we don't talk about often. And I think as a leader, it is even more important to create that environment where you can really rally people, because product managers, build products, but product management leaders, they build products, they build people, and they build companies. So I think it's a shift in mindset, and also that honing of certain skills that requires you to move from one to the other.
I like that quite a bit. In fact, like I mentioned previously, I came from development and into product management. One of my first things was, I know what developers need, so I was being overly helpful. And then had to realize, you got to know, like in a baton race, when to hand the baton off and don't go running somebody else's leg of the race. And it's similar, when you escalate, you go from more of, even though our digital products are a little abstract, then you start working on the culture, the methodology, and setting more context as you evolve in the conversation. So you're still focusing on product management. You're just giving others the space to do it, and you yourself are making sure they all function within the space that you create, with business constraints in mind, technology constraints in mind, people constraints in mind, right? All of this has to come together. Now, as I talked a little bit, flashback to the beginning of my career in product management, I think there's probably some listeners that are wondering, how do I get into that, right? So I'm curious, Megha, like, do you have some good advice for how do you transition into product management?
Yeah, sure. So like we have talked, product management is a pretty broad role, and there are some skill sets that are key, but you can come from any industry, pick your own path, make your path into product management. So I think the key is like how you try to solve the problem at hand from a customer or business point of view, and how do you bring that problem, break it down into pieces, prioritize, and work with the different stakeholders. So if you can do that and sell that vision and that product to your customers, you're in a very sweet spot. So getting into product management today is not so hard. You can come from any industry if you have some of those skills overlapping. Also, there are a lot of different certifications out there, or school just focusing on product management, like Product School, which is a school I teach at as well. So there are ways to learn from teaching. There's ways to learn from hands-on experience or your past experience. It's really a journey you have to make on your own.
So you touched on it, but just to dial in a little bit more, education, certification, job experience. It sounds like you're saying that, in the end, it's what you bring to the table and your ability to function within the context the company operates in. Or do you think that there's a little bit more to that? Do you have any recommendations on these, or really is it just be tenacious and keep working at your skills?
It's also where you want to go and if it's the right fit for the company. So if you are from a technical background and there is a company looking for a technical PM, that might be a good fit and you can make that happen. But I've also seen great product managers coming from customer success teams who are used to talking to customers day in and out, and they know the needs of the customers, and they sometimes even move within the company. I've also seen great PMs coming from the analytics background. So they could be data analysts, and they know how to work with the data. And there could be great growth PMs for a company that fits that need. So it's really trying to figure out what your superpower is, what your experience is, and what the need of the company is, and make that work.
Excellent. I think it's good, like, to know thyself, right? What are you good at? When you think about a book I liked to kind of add to Ashish's book list, one was First Break All the Rules. And it's more when you get into leadership, thinking about how do you hire people based on where they're talented. Because when you're talented, you have neural pathways you use all the time. So it becomes easier to process information and to handle it. So in some cases, you might have a dirt path. In other cases, you might have, a super highway. Like, I'm not the person you want being a singer in a karaoke room. I can clear it out pretty well. But in product management, figuring it out something I do. So some developers are problem solvers. They take a set of known variables and they create a solution for that. Product management is more of a figuring it out, of taking those unknown variables, figuring them out, and creating that context. So the developers or the designers can then go ahead and be clear about hitting the target. Well, this has been a really great question in answer to time period here, a good discussion. What I'd like to do is, if we have time, go ahead and open it up and go off the rails a little bit and see if there's any questions from the audience that we can field and address. So the first one that comes up over here is, what's most imperative for a product manager? Is it domain or technology? Both go hand in hand, but is there a balancing ground? So somebody want to go ahead and field that one?
I'll take a stab at it, and maybe because I have worked in different domains. I think it has to go back to, find what drives you. It's not fun to be in a domain if that's not an industry, for example, that you really think I want to work in. So, for example, if for one point in my career, I think when I was in e-commerce, and I remember talking to my manager at the time, like I was leading the health and wellness and some online stuff, and then it was like, oh, we also had to do, how do we do online sales for wine and alcohol. Now, I enjoy a good glass of wine, but I was like, I'm not the right product manager for it because I just don't believe in it. So I think it's really critical to find what drives you, what interests you. I do recommend keeping a note of what you read, the kind of content you consume, because that helps you narrow down that perhaps my interests lie in this area. I think domain knowledge, if you're early in your career, building that domain knowledge in various different ways enables you to break it, I think, into the industry much better because you're understanding a space. I don't come from a technology background, so I am not a big proponent, oh, you have to have technology education. I think you hire for talent, you hire for potential, but I do think it is very critical to be, you may not be the programmer, but you have to understand technology. You have to know how things work. You would really have to be curious to understand how the nuts and bolts and the pipes really function in order to truly be a great product manager, because now you know how things work. And you can also you also build this muscle of, well, what is the potential? What is the writing on the wall? What are global events happening? Because I think it's not just building for today. You also you build that muscle of what is macro and micro, and that kind of enables you to truly, I think, build for the future, but also meet the current needs. And I think that's how you build a loyal customer base. And at the end of the day, if you look at any business that has been around, I mean, there was an article not too long about 200 businesses globally that have been around for over 100 years. And if you go and you dig deeper, it's like, wait, what enables them to stay around for so long? And I think it goes back to the basic principles. So that ability to cater for today, but also what is the future? What could it look like, right? And I think hence that domain plus the technical acumen is key as well.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit more.
Oh, go ahead. I'll go after Ashish.
So yeah, I was going to just add a little bit more to what Nidhi was saying, right? So first thing, I think both of you mentioned that you should know your strengths, and there's a book from Tom Rath called Strengths Finder. So you should not get into something because you think it is glamorous or exciting. You should realize whether or not you're going to really enjoy that in the long term. The second part, like the way I look at it into the specific question, I almost look at the product management career in kind of three stages. Like in the first stage of your career, when you're just starting out, I'm looking for people who have the right aptitude, the curiosity, the talent, and the basic skill set, and so forth. In the second phase, once you have proven that, you have broken into product management, you know how to collaborate, to work with different teams, bring something to market. In the second phase of your career is when I would look for a little bit more of a domain expertise, because like I said, if I'm looking for a PM for a DoorDash mobile app versus the enterprise infrastructure security, I'm looking for that domain expertise for the mid-level. And then in my third stage of the product management, that's when I look for more kind of leadership and, don't just lead a product, lead people. And I think that becomes a little bit more relevant into more advanced stage of your career. And hopefully by that time, you have led more than one domain. So you have a little bit more perspective. So anyway, so that's the way I would think is the skill set is required depending upon where you are in your career ladder.
And the way the question was phrased, the most imperative for product managers, and then you kind of led the witness by saying domain or technology. Well, where I've seen a lot of product managers fail is not in either of those two. It's in the art of communication, the ability to tell a story, because a product manager leads predominantly through influence. So if you can't influence so other people understand why we're doing it, who we're doing it for, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to prioritize it, if you can't tell a good narrative around this, then a lot of times inside a company, even though you've got domain expertise or technology, you might not have the breakaway success that you're going to need until you're able to clearly articulate a vision and a captivating story that really helps people see it, get behind it, and make it happen. Okay, let's take another question. What are the identifiable differences between a project manager and a product manager? Now, I will just say before we let everybody answer, it also depends on the company, because in some roles, product manager is a scrum master, but we will go ahead and split hairs here. And Megha, you want to jump in on this one first, and then we'll open it to
Sure. Yeah, this one gets asked a lot, PM versus PM, and there's also product owner. So actually the main difference, in my opinion, is project manager is a bit more about, tactical, getting something out the door. So it's about, timelines, milestones, what is being built when, while the product manager is more at a, more of a visionary level where you're thinking more strategically at, you're building out this feature maybe, but maybe you're building, another version of it later, or you have something sequenced on how it helps the customer in the long run. So it's not just, you build this and you ship it out, and you're not worried too much about milestones all the time. You're worried about the impact and the key metrics you're going to measure after it's launched. So that's some of the differences between project manager and product manager I've seen. But again, it's company dependent, like you said.
Yeah, I will add to that. The project manager is somebody who will keep the trains moving, and the product manager is the one who will help where the train is going. So it's a slightly different, and in some companies, especially startups, you end up combining the two. And we mentioned product owners, scrum masters, program managers, but I think that's where some of the difference would start to appear.
Yeah, and to add one thing, product owner versus product manager, right? If you're in an agile team doing development, a product manager can fulfill the role of a product owner. Now, in a larger organization, I've had all product managers, but I've had some function more as a product manager, helping set context, strategy, competition, and the high level. And then the product owner, usually someone more junior, works within that context to stay with the team day in, day out, and make sure that actually happens. So it doesn't have to happen that way, but in my experience, that worked well when you have a larger team. If it's smaller, the product manager is the product owner. It's just what they're fulfilling in the agile team.
Yeah, my heart cringes every time we say project. I know, but this comes up so often. I think for anyone that's interested in, entering the product, I think project, program, product management, they're all very specific disciplines in terms of what they do, right? But those that are really, I think, the core competencies of product management is around customer insight, product strategy, product execution, and influencing people. Now, what you do at every level may vary, which is it's not project management. So I think when you look at these are the four things, that's what product management is all about. It's just that you're a product management with different levels of skills and seniority at different times in your career. I'm also not a big fan of product owners. So I believe product management is product managers. It's just what you do at every level builds on as to what you've done previously. And I think, but at the end of the day, it goes back to the core competencies, which is going back to, business value. I mean, you're driving outcomes, you're focused on the customer, you're doing the execution, you're thinking strategically, and you're influencing people. It's just what you will do will vary at different levels.
Great, thank you, Nidhi. And for our last question, as you work for both startups and established orgs, how one should decide whether they should pick product management job with established organization or a startup. And it's directed to you first, Ashish.
So in a way, I want to start with it depends. And I had a opportunity to work with VMware and eBay, fairly large orgs, and this is my second startup now. I think in my mind, you end up exercising different muscles of your body based on whether or not you are a big versus a startup. Now, for me, I stayed with the same domain across my 15, 20 plus of careers around identity and risk and security. So that helped a little bit in terms of changing it. In a big company, the fact that you have a lot more people, a lot more collaboration, a lot more defined roles, honestly, sometimes slower to move. But once you move it, your go-to-market functions are a lot more established compared to a startup where, you have to pick up a lot of pieces. So, you feel like janitor a lot more often than you would want to. So I think the short answer is I love both sides of it. Depending upon what you have experienced it, I would strongly recommend to try both sides because you're going to end up learning very different skill set and build very different perspectives, which will eventually result into making you a better, bigger, much higher from a perspective standpoint, a product person.
Thank you, Ashish. I want to add one more closing thought to this before we wrap up here, and that is, if you're with a current company and you're looking to change to product management, do it with the company you're at if possible, because the work you've already done will give you some grace moving forward and usually a good network that's willing to support you. So just to consider that if there's an option from where you're at, by all means start there. And then if not, then branch out. Well, folks, this is the
if not, then reach out to me. I'm always looking for good PMs.
There you go, guys. So this is the end of the Future Product Management. I guys hope you found the information valuable. Anuj, would you like to close this out for the live stream? You're on mute. We had to get that in, didn't we?
Yes, I was trying to trick you there. That was amazing. Wow, that was an awesome session, to be honest. A lot to chew on. Thank you so much, for sharing all of those resources and insight. Obviously, I want to thank all of our panel, Nidhi, Megha, Ashish, and Travis, for taking out your valuable time to join us today and share all of this information. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here that I could hear you guys talk all day. I mean, that hands down. For all our listeners, if you didn't get to ask your question live, ask us on Twitter at BayOne Solutions and tag Future of Work. If you missed part or want to re-listen any of this, these will be available on YouTube shortly. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about our webinars or listen to some old ones that we have, again, make sure you head over to our LinkedIn and YouTube pages. It has some awesome content and speakers. Finally, if you would like to know more about us at BayOne, please visit our website. Thank you again. Hope to see you in the next live stream. Enjoy the rest of your day and talk to you soon.